Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Cheddar Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor, and I am joined by our special guest, Dillion Carter, one of the co-founders of Aurora Repricer. How are you doing, Dillon?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. We're going to be diving into everything that has to do with repricing. Aurora is one of the top repricers out there right now. I love your guys' product. I love how simple it is. I love your guys' price point as well. And I think it's something that a lot, especially newer sellers, when they first jump into Amazon, don't realize how powerful adding a repricer to your strategy is. And so we're going to dive into that. But I have one question for you right off the bat. What is the biggest misconception that sellers have when it comes to repricers and the need for a repricer?
Yeah, good question. There's a handful, but if I had to pick one, it would be that repricing only lowers your price and lowers profitability. That's not entirely true, although lowering your price does happen, but there's more to it than that, right? A very simplistic approach is, okay, well, my price is going down, that's bad. Actually not, and we can talk about this, right? I'm a finance major, so I geek out on like the economic side of this. A lot of times, inventory is not moving fast enough, and so by lowering your price, you're becoming more, like the price point becomes more feasible for the end consumer, and therefore sales volume goes up. You want to find that balance, right? You can't increase sales volume and profitability for the most part, especially as a reseller. So we try to find that balance of how can I move inventory, move volume at a still healthy rate.
Right.
That's what we attempt to do. And a lot of your repricing tools don't think about it that way, or are designed only to go down and then just pop up, kind of last minute. For us, we built it like current Aura and new Aura's, could be vastly more than this, but current Aura is designed to think about when does it make sense to go up, and try to be a little bit more intelligent about that, because again, we want to find a nice average here. So that's the big one. There's a lot to unpack in there, but for the most part, I would say that's the biggest misconception.
I mean, that's totally, I never thought of it that way, because it is true. I mean, there are times. So a little backstory about us: we're repricing cavemen for the longest time. My brother and I, we used our repricer. We would manually set up our minimums and our maximums, and we would just do a matching strategy. And it was simple, but it took a lot of time for one. And we were focusing in on moving inventory, right? But not focus as much on the profit. And for me as the buyer, there'd be times where I'd see something sell and I would just cringe, because I'd be like, why? I bought that for a month from now, or for the springtime. Like, we shouldn't have sold this. That had a huge potential of making great profit. We just made, a sliver of profit. So talking about that more. So when you designed Aura, you kept that in mind, wanting to help move inventory, but also at the same time keep profitability as best as you can. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that came up?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a unique position where we were sellers. Like, we get it, right? What ends up happening in our space is you have technical people come into the space who do not understand what it's like to be a seller. So those subtle nuances kind of go out the door, right? That's why a lot of your tools are just oddly difficult to use. It just feels like they're missing something. Well, they're missing the experience of being a seller. Or the inverse happens, right? You have somebody who does very well as a seller. They build a nice audience and they say, hey, I'm going to go into software. I can make a bunch of money, blah, blah, blah. And then they outsource all the technical engineering aspects of it. Again, you're going to have some problems there, right? For us, both the founders happen to be Amazon sellers. One of the founders happened to be technical, right? An actual software engineer. So when we sat down, we said, well, what would we have wanted in a repricing tool? Let's go build that.
Right.
And so it does come down to, there's no one size fits all when you're talking strategies and what makes sense, right? You really want to have enough variety of what you can do, because for some SKUs, you do want to hold it for a while and you want to hold out for a nice profit. For other SKUs, you actually want to move relatively fast, because the risk of holding it and losing capital is much higher. And I think I'm active on Twitter these days, and a lot of the conversations I see are, you're missing out on profit. Right. That's not the whole equation, though. So I'll give you a good example, right? Let's say a SKU is not really moving super fast, but you're like, hey, it's been there for 3 weeks, it's fine. Okay, but if 2 weeks ago I could have moved it for 20 cents less, and let's say this is a $30 item, one, you're not going to miss the 20 cents. Two, the value of moving it that much quicker means you're avoiding any kind of fees. You're also getting the capital back. You're also locking down the ROI, the actual profit, and you get to re-spend that profit and the initial capital again, right? You're increasing your churn rate. And so where a lot of sellers get confused is like, oh, everybody's missing out on profitability because they're doing this. And the typical response I get is, okay, well, 20 cents isn't a big deal on one SKU, but let's extrapolate this out to 100,000 SKUs. Okay, let's do that. It's an assumption that that 20 cents higher was actually going to give you a sale. That's where it could have, but it didn't. The simple fact is it didn't, and it did sell 20 cents lower. So this gap between where things do sell and where we expect them to sell is very interesting, because this is our expectation of the market and this is the actual market.
Right.
This is irrelevant to me. Right. And so what's interesting is, again, it's not that you're missing out on profitability. This gap has absolutely everything to do with missing out on the opportunity cost, right? So if let's say the market, you could sell something for us here, you expect it up here and you're willing to play in this gap, but not come down to here, right? What ends up happening is the opportunity cost of you not locking down that sale is higher than the gap between these two price points, right? So let's consider this 20 cents, right? Keep it simple. This is 20 cents. That 20 cents could be the difference between you moving a product tomorrow that's already been there for 3 weeks or an additional 6 weeks.
Right.
Again, you could have sold that for 35 instead of 35.20 tomorrow, re-spent that again, got another ROI on top of that. So now you've done a compound, you've compounded your money. And you made way more than 20 cents in the same period of time. And a lot of people miss that. So once people start to understand that and play in that world, you start to see their volume of sales go through the roof. And what's so interesting is actually your average net profit does not go down that much. It really doesn't. You might talk like a 1% to 2% kind of range. But again, you're moving more volume and the dollars you're playing with are much higher, which is kind of nice. So you're making more money.
100%. And we've talked about that too. Don't be married to your inventory, right? Yes. Don't be sitting there and holding on to like, well, I've already spent 500 and I'm hoping I'm going to make, $200 in profit. And if I don't make that, then I'm not successful. I didn't win. It's like, no, make $100 in profit off that 500, then go spend that $600 now and go make 120. And like you said, within a 6 week period, you can flip $1, 2, maybe even 3 times if you're buying the right inventory. And that's, and we for Grant and I, because again, we're so limited on time and we're again, super simple, like we've had the same repricer for way too long. I'm actually like hoping that this call, Grant, if you're listening to this call, let's start talking about, changing up our systems a little bit. But we held on to, we did the pricing match strategy. And what we found over time is it ended up costing us a bunch. We became overinflated into our store. And our strategy at that time was just, here's our minimum. And our minimum was making us at least $1.50 in profit and match. And then we used to set it and forget it. And it made sense back then because saving time and we were moving inventory pretty well. Well, then we started over time. Next, I call it bloat. Our store just got filled up and our inventory age just started growing and growing. And we've been much more aggressive at, hey, we'll even take a small loss if it means that we can get our initial capital back and reinvest it within a 90-day period of time. And thankfully, our inventory age has gotten lower. But being married to inventory, especially for new sellers, it's really hard when you spend your first, say you spending $1,000 and this is your first time investing it into your FBA business, and you go, and I have to. I know I have a friend who does this. He started out selling and he just started checking every SKU every single day and obsessed. And one of the pieces of advice I gave him was stop doing that. Like get yourself a good repricer, set up your parameters so you're not going to be losing a tremendous amount of money, or at least you're going to be safe, and then go find more products. And his store turned and started turning inventory and you really
want to think about the whole process here, the life cycle of your inventory, because you're right, it does not come down to a single unit. If you're measuring success by a single unit, you're missing the broader picture, right? You're missing the forest for the trees, so to speak. So what we tend to recommend is to think about the life cycle of every product that comes in your door, right? Assume we have a factory. We're designing the factory, new inventory comes in, and then profit comes out. What happens inside the warehouse, so to speak, right? Inside the factory.
Right.
For most people, they have a minimum that they would like to make that makes sense based on their buys, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are like, I want minimum 50%. I'm like, well, based on your buy costs and the current average buy box relative to that, that's not possible. Like you have to be realistic here, right? But listen, if you can buy things at 50%, ROI, and you know that you can get 30 all day long, fantastic. Let's do that. So what you want to say is, okay, well, within what time frames do I want to do certain things, right? Phase one, let's call it first 2 to 3 weeks, could be 30 days, depends on how aggressive you want to be. Mm-hmm. You say, I want to be aggressive or I want to be conservative, right? Everybody's different. I understand. But let's say you want to compete, but you want to compete in a very healthy margin area. Awesome. Do that for 3 to 4 weeks. Now, let's say month 2, to keep it simple. So month 1, we're going to do that. Month 2, we want to start moving inventory because now it's becoming an opportunity cost problem, right? So let's say we're still going to compete the same, but we're willing to compete at a lower margin range. So now my minimum, as an example, goes from that 30% in phase 1 to, let's say, 10%, maybe 15% in phase 2. I'm willing to move it faster, right?
Right.
Phase 3 could be month 3. And I think 3 months is actually way too inflated, but just to keep it simple, you might say, that's my liquidation phase. It's not about making money. It's about getting capital back because, again, opportunity cost goes through the roof. So basically, as we're going through these phases, the opportunity cost of not moving your inventory becomes higher than the profitability you theoretically could get. Therefore, it actually mathematically makes sense for you to get it back. So if you think about it from that perspective, you can build 3 strategies. Each phase is its own strategy. And then just basically, again, we're going to pump inventory in, profitability out, but we're going to do it in a way that makes sense. When you can get to that place, it's a little bit easier to manage things at a macro level. And it's nice, right? Because now you're not managing SKU by SKU, unit by unit. You're saying, well, no, all of my SKUs come in to strategy 1 for phase 1. And let's say 30% is just really like your buys are not that good. 30% is not realistic for you. Okay, great. Take it from 15 or from 30% to 15% and adjust phase 2 and 3. But you just adjusted your entire SKU count, your entire inventory in phase 1 in with like 1 click. I mean, that's impressive. Talk about leverage, right? Now you're not going through and be like, let me recalculate. No, we got your costs. We know the fees. We know 30%. You take it to 15%. We'll auto calculate it and update it for you at the next price change. Problem solved. And here's what's great about this, right? A lot of people will say, well, that sucks, right? I just halved it. Yeah, but repricing is an amplification on your buys, right? If you're bad at sourcing, repricing will not make you more profitable for the most part, right? But that's okay, because if we go from 30 to 15% and we're like, hey, like we're getting capital moving, we're getting profits, we're still okay. It's just not as profitable. Great. Guess what? Go focus on making more profitable buys. Now we can take that 15 to a 30% in 1 click as well.
Right.
So when you start to think about it from a macro perspective, this big kind of factory kind of analogy, it starts to click a little bit easier for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, and it makes it so much easier to manage. And like you say, take your focus and put it towards the stuff that is going to be making you money, because like you say, repricing it's going to amplify your sales, but it's not the thing that brings in the profit. That's going to come from your sourcing. So freeing yourself up. And so with Aurora, you can do that. So you can set up a like we'll just keep the 1, 2, 3 month, plan. So for my first month, let's focus on getting as much profit as we can. Let's not try to sell so quickly. And then second month, hey, let's start kind of moving some stuff out. Then third month, it's like, hey, go. Let's get back some capital and reinvest, and I know a lot of folks who are doing that manually. A lot of folks who either look at it on the micro and are looking at single SKUs and are watching those too closely, or they like what we were doing. Here's our wide range. Here's the lowest amount. Here's the most we'll take, and then just send it out there. And the problem with that is we're selling stuff that we shouldn't be selling. Right. For too cheap. We take the list hit happens, right? The race to the bottom happens and we sell it at the bottom, and it's like, no, I'd rather sell it at the rebound because it's a fast moving SKU.
Yeah.
And I know that within 30 days, that it should rebound. And we tell our customers this too. Like when I'm looking at a product lead myself, I look at how fast is this moving? How many can I purchase from the source? And how does that play into what I think is going to happen in the next 30 to 60 days? If I know that, like GameStop, they always limit you on how many you can order, usually like 2 or 3 units or something. So if I know that GameStop's I can only buy 3 units, and maybe I can get an order out a day for the next week while this sale is happening. At most, I can get 15 units. And if I'm talking about an item that's in like the 10,000 rank or lower, well, then heck, I don't want to sell it when it hits the lowest price point because a handful of offers came in. I'd rather wait and for that first month. Yeah, that just makes sense.
Well, and I think you want to think about too, and you mentioned this earlier in the conversation, which was like back in the day, we could do this and it worked, right? I want to highlight that because it's an interesting point. Like back in the day, there was less competition per SKU. So the things that worked back then, you could match. And this is why back in the day, and I say back in the day like I'm old now, back in when I was a seller, 10 years ago, everybody hated penny chasers, right? That's why you hear that. You're tanking the buy box. Okay, let's talk about that for a second.
Yes,
back
please.
then, it did not make sense because the percentage of time you could be in the buy box due to rotation without beating the price was much higher because you had less competition per SKU. So you could be like, I'm just not going to beat you. I'll match you. And I just know that I've got 5 SKUs and I can sell those in like 2 weeks. Great.
Right.
But what happens when the average number of competitors on a listing goes up 2 to 4x? Rotation is still there, but now the average, the slice of the pie, right? It just got sliced up more.
Much thinner.
The organic amount of buy box rotation you're going to get is so small. And the outcome of that being true is it takes you much longer to sell your inventory. That becomes a problem. So, okay, not ideal. The reality is that's true. So when we start to beat the buy box and increase competition, we start to sell inventory more quickly. And the simple fact is competition, as it goes up, will decrease the price. It's supply and demand, right?
Right, 100%.
A lot of sellers get this confused. A lot of sellers go, oh, they're tanking the price. I'm like, do you know that seller? Well, no. I'm like, how do you know they paid the same thing? I love when sellers are like, they're losing money. They're an idiot. I was like, do you know their buy cost? Because it could be half of yours. And they could actually be making a higher ROI and moving more units than you are. And you have no idea. It's like, we need to pause and think that most people aren't actually out here losing money. Sometimes you got to liquidate and that's fine. I've had a few hundred units in stock back in the day where I'm like, I got to liquidate it. Great. I'll lose money on it.
Right.
I'm intentionally tanking it, but I'm not tanking it. What I'm doing is adjusting the market real quick because there's too much inventory. So I think a lot of sellers need to shift their perspective and mindset on why is that seller doing that? Maybe it's actually a good decision and not a bad decision. And think about when you should do it too. I mean, right? I mean, listen, if you're holding 50 units of a SKU and it's moving super slow, you want to know how to move it faster? Lower your price.
Right.
I mean, I was looking at a lead the other day for OA with somebody, and it's like, oh, we estimate we can move X number of units at this price point. I was like, okay. And that's where the buy box was. I was like, okay, the amount of margin we have to play with is super high. If we want to move more units, what happens if we lower the buy box by 10 to 15%?
Right.
Naturally, we'll move more units. So we're de-risking that SKU. That's actually an intelligent thing to do in some cases.
Yeah. Well, because then there's conversions that happen. Amazon sees more sales. They're going to rank that product higher in the search results, which is going to result in it's all part of the same machine. It's just different aspects, different parts, and so, yes, I mean, lowering your price, sometimes that makes sense, is the smart move. And you see it in graphs all the time where, you might be looking at a sales rank moving, and then as soon as the price lowers, the sales rank drops along with it. And then you're talking about an item that's selling, maybe 2x, 5x, 10x faster than it was selling. At a much higher price. We tell our lead generating team that all the time, that hey, if you see a lead and it's kind of selling slower, but there's a lot of profit, still share it with us, because the advanced seller or the experienced seller is going to look at that and go, well, heck, there's $20 of profit there on a $40 item, I'll take $10 of profit, and I
Yeah.
can see, maybe historically I'm looking back and seeing, hey, this was selling really well, at $10 less than where it currently is sitting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that totally makes sense. So talking about Aurora is, how do you guys make that, as we're talking about, the buy box used to be a bigger slice of the pie, now it's thinner. So how are we gonna, how do we get the buy box more often with a thinner slice, and by not just necessarily just dropping, trying to have the lowest price every single time? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way we are looking to approach it with new Aura 1.0, is to essentially create a unique strategy for every single SKU.
Yeah.
It's gotten that complex. I wish it wasn't, right? Again, 10 years ago, you could have one strategy, apply it, and like it was totally fine. But now there's so many. And here's the thing, right? If anybody tells you here's how to win the buy box, they're probably wrong. We run a repricing tool, and I know that 80% of the time this is true, but I can look at the next SKU and it's now not true. Amazon does not tell anybody, here's the algorithm, right? We have to play with different things and see what works. And what we've realized is, well, you can't really say this is the way it works, or these are the 5 way it works. It's really every SKU and every competitor and every seller, right? If you can have the best price, but if you have horrible feedback and a lot less feedback than another seller, good luck. Repricing won't really help you that much, right? So you really want to think more holistically about your account as a seller. You want to think through, how can I maximize my feedback as a seller, right? How not only just quality but quantity. Like, we need to start, even as resellers. Back in the day, nobody cared. It's like, yeah, I got 12. What does it matter? Now it matters, because every vote that Amazon can see that a customer made of you being good, they will consider.
Yeah.
Can't tell you the weighting, can't tell you any of that, right? But because I can't tell you exactly how it works, what I can tell you is how to approach it from a mindset perspective, right? If you can do that, you're going to be good. Another thing that a lot of people don't consider, and it's less so for OA, right? Because you're dealing typically with smaller units per SKU, but particularly for wholesale, regional buy boxes are a thing. Amazon does not expose that via the API, so there's no way to reprice or even be aware of it. But what's interesting is, as you're increasing your volume, you have more distribution geographically of your inventory. Now, because now you have 5 units in Charlotte and somebody's there to purchase, well, that's easier for logistically Amazon to get that product to that user. So that makes sense. It's a simple hack, and that's not even repricing, right? That's just seeding the market and being better available, right? You're looking at inventory availability at this point. In terms of pricing specifically, though, there's no right way. There's no perfect way to define success. I know it's a weird thing to say. I think a lot of people in our space, especially software companies, are saying this is success. It's like, it depends, is what I've learned, right? It depends on how much capital do you have. Because if you don't have a lot of capital and your inventory is moving slow, you're now not going to grow. So you need to move your inventory more quickly. And actually, you should take a lower ROI so that you can compound your actual capital base more quickly. Whereas if you come in and you have $50,000 and you don't have a lot of inventory, I think it's okay for you to let it sit there a little bit longer, because you're not even, like, what are you going to do, right? You're going to get that back, and like, it doesn't matter. So that really depends on the pricing side. Like, should you match? Should you not match? I think for the most part, you should not. I know it's funny when we first, became public as a company. Again, we come from the seller community, right? I also believe penny chasing and price tankers were, horrible people. Now, having seen tens of thousands of people price change, that's not true. The simple fact is, you can actually dramatically increase, again, your sales volume. And what's so crazy is, a lot of times your profitability, your net profit per unit, or your average profit per unit actually goes up. That's so interesting to me. A lot of people don't understand, well, you're lowering my price. Yeah, I'm going to lower it to here, but I'm going to bounce back up to twice that. And now the average might have gone up a little bit. So again, how do you define success here? It depends on where you're at as a business and what your bottlenecks are. Is it inventory? Is it sourcing? Maybe you can be a little bit more conservative, or is it capital? Actually, you should be a little bit more aggressive. Once you start to think more holistically about the business, then it makes sense to have that discussion of what should you be doing. Now, can I give a blanket statement and say 80% of the time an oscillation strategy tends to work? Yeah, I definitely can. But if you want to really get advanced with it and really think about it from a business perspective, there's a few more variables at play that we should consider. And this is one of the reasons why we've been so much more collaborative on our support team. Instead of outsourcing all that, we insource it, right? We got Finn and Abby. We'll jump into a Zoom call with you, be like, we're going to ask you those questions. Yeah. Because I can't just be like, it's X. It's like, yeah, but in your case, it could be X plus 2 or Y, what have you.
No, that totally makes sense. And for the new sellers out there too, you know, there's always been this thought of, okay, buy the high profit stuff, try to find more profitable stuff because you don't have as much capital to use. And I would agree with you. I would say the opposite. Take lower margins and get your volume up, make sales, because if you get your feedback up, you're going to be more competitive. We've been selling for Grant started a store about 10 years ago, and we have roughly about 2,800 feedback scores, and we keep like a 98% rating. And I'm forgetting the word I'm trying to think of. I totally do not appreciate what that does for our store and when it comes to turning our inventory, because I know that I can go into a listing and there could be 10 other offers, but if I'm one of the highest with feedback reviews, I'm going to get sales more than they will. I don't know how much by, but I know that I'm going to get sales more. And I know this because when I've done wholesale, I had this great wholesale product, was cranking, making a great profit per unit, and life was good until they brought on a second wholesaler who had 10,000 reviews, and next thing you know, my buy box ownership went from 100% to 20%. And there was the only difference I could see was just the number of reviews that we had, our feedback scores. So like you're saying, and I appreciate the fact that you are thinking about your customer success, not just in the repricing way, but all the other variables and trying to get to know them more, because you might run into the new seller. You might have the advanced seller who has a deep pockets and can let inventory sit for a while. We just had a great example last call. We had these tents. We bought them in November, these big giant 10-person tents. Grant got them back we removed them from inventory on accident, but Grant got them. He's like, why the hell are we selling these giant tents? And I said, just wait till spring and summer. Just put them in your garage and wait. You won't be disappointed. And sure enough, spring came. We sold all of them super quickly for a really good, decent amount of profit. But we wouldn't be, that was a $1,100 investment I think we put into that order. And if, in our first year or two, or heck, our first 3-4 years, that would have been a huge problem because that would have been tying up capital for that long. So, man, that's awesome. Okay, so we're talking about Aura, and then you're saying Aura 1. So you have this update. Can you speak more about that? Because I've looked at your site and how it pulled up here, and you guys have some really cool stuff coming into the next version. So can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah. So we paused on product updates for a number of years to just build a team up and figure out who are we as a company and all that stuff, right? And we got more capacity. We're like, cool, let's get back to it. And when it came down to, great, what features? We kind of ended up the conversation on, actually, we need to rebuild it from the ground up. And the reason why we're saying new Aura is Aura 1.0 is, if you look in the bottom left, if you're logged in, the version is 0.9. Not 1 point something. We launched this as a beta and it took off. And granted, we bug fixed and all that stuff, but it took off so much faster than we thought it would. And so, great problem to have. But when that's occurring and you have one engineer who happens to be one of the founders, you can't pump out new features and all the other. You got to prioritize, right? We're also in college full time too, right? So it's not like we had tons of time to just sit back and figure it out. And so we're like, well, we got some time. It's going to be very difficult, but let's rebuild it from the ground up. What would the architecture be like? How do we build it for scale? That's the thing too. When you're building software, you don't initially build it for massive scale because you have no idea if you're going to get there. It's a waste of time. But if it does
Yep.
take off, great. Now you got to pause, you got to re-architect for scale and all that stuff, right? There's a cost
Yep.
to that too that you got to consider from a business perspective. So when we started to take a step back and say, okay, what would this take time-wise, capital-wise? What would this enable us to do? We're like, oh, this is really awesome. So in doing this, this has allowed us to introduce some unique features that we just otherwise would not be able to support. And I think those are going to be major differentiating features that our competition, again, can't do because it's a whole re-architecture, which is just like bonkers, right? I mean, this is an 8 to 9 month process. I mean, it's bonkers. So we said, great, if we were to build Aura today, what would that look like and feel like? It'd be like knowing what we know now. And so we started almost from scratch, right? It's still going to feel friendly in terms of like, if you've used Aura, you're going to understand how it flows and how it works and where is certain things. But the product itself, we took a step back and we said, okay, well, we have a product designer on the team. Tasso, he's actually behind this background. But we're like, great, let's think about how should it look? How should it feel? How should it function? Right? UI, UX, all these things. Who are we as a brand? We actually went through a full, brand identity change, which we're slowly rolling out. So everything is changing. The way we're doing support, we're rethinking about that because again, now the technology that exists in some of our tools is way more advanced. We need to consider those things. So on the more product-led side of things, the application is just going to be so much faster, so much cleaner, so much easier to use. When we surveyed, we talked to about 300 users via Zoom over a few months to get some feedback and ideate on some ideas. And the term that kept coming up was intuitive. Aura currently feels intuitive. So we're like, great, we want to run with that and make it feel even more intuitive. So the flow, how you're going to do things are going to be slightly better, which is going to be awesome. Right. But in terms of features, I mean, listen, we're going from, we've only supported North America, which is the 3 marketplaces, to we're going to scale out to all 20 marketplaces. We'll have currency conversion, like proper currency conversion, which is going to be awesome. Finally, able to introduce actual AI repricing strategies, which we've been wanting to work on forever, but just have not had the capacity to do it until now. So that's changing. Hyperdrive is one of the ones that I am probably the most excited about. So historically, Amazon has only allowed repricing tools to submit price changes every 2 minutes. That's considered instant repricing, though.
Okay.
I mean, like when you read instant, that is every 2 minutes because it is instantly as we can, right? In our system, we are not limiting you, right? So as an example, if a tool says, hey, we're going to reprice you once every 15 minutes, they could do it every 2 minutes, but they're intentionally delaying you to slow you down, right? Because you're not paying enough. We have not done that, but in this re-architecture, we have found a clever way to submit price changes every 10 seconds for up to 50 SKUs at a time.
Oh, okay.
We are testing this right now on a demo account that we have actual live inventory, and the buy box percentages are insane, to say the least. Because we're seeing examples where we've submitted the third price change, and then one of the competitors is reacting to 3 price changes back. I mean, think about it, right? Because think about it, every 2 minutes, divide that by 10 seconds, best case, that's the number of times that we could have repriced before you could even respond. And what's happening is, so at time 0, let's say price change happens, competition goes, great, I'm going to calculate it, I'm going to submit it. Now the clock's ticking, we got 2 minutes. Well, we already submitted our price change within that first 10 seconds. So by the time we get to 2 minutes, the price change that is reflected that was submitted here is now out of date. So think about that. What that means are your most critical listings, your most competitive listings. So this is in addition to repricing. It's essentially an additional toggle, right? You have repricing on, you go, you know what? I need this one. Toggle it on, let Aura take care of the rest. It's great. So that's a really awesome one. One of the things we would like to explore, we're not going to do this for launch, is also allowing Aura to have the intelligence of deciding when to apply hyperdrive and when to not. Sometimes, because that can still be a lot, right? You might know you're 50, and be like, I got this, we're good. But man, if you're managing 5,000 SKUs, and we can only do up to 50, right? There's a technical limitation there. Well, that could change hour by hour. So why not have Aura do that for you hour by hour and say, hey, what's true now? What's competitive now? Turn these 50 off, turn these 50 on. In an hour, it's going to be completely different. But now what we're doing is we're taking massive advantage in real time as things change. So that becomes huge. Another feature we're exploring is called replay. So this allows, this allows users to actually interact with Aura in a new and unique way, where you get to say, basically replay the last offer change, right? We will basically take a snapshot of the last offer change. What was true, competition, everything. And let's say, as an example, your strategy operates like X, but you change it to Y, and you're like, I wonder how that would have changed. It's only the most recent, but you can say, redo it again. Great. Yeah. Now we're just going to say, well, now what's true? What was the last, right? So that enables us to, one, allow you to make a change and very quickly say, do that again, but do that with the updated stuff. Let's see how that works, right? Because maybe it performed in a way that you didn't quite expect. And you're like, oh, I know what caused that. It's this one setting in my strategy. Now you don't have to change it and wait for the next organic price change. Just replay the last one. We're also using this on the back end for some of our repricing stuff too. So what's nice is we can actually say, okay, let's say you have 50 SKUs on a strategy, right? You go through your strategy and you change one setting and you hit save. Well, technically that should be applied to all 50, right? So that replay system allows us to do now is say, great, go replay those 50 SKUs with the most recent change to that strategy.
I see.
Right. So in terms of speed, reacting to the changes you have made, whether that's to a SKU, to a listing, right? It could be cost, whatever, or to a strategy that applies to a large number of SKUs. So in terms of, I made a change, I want to see that happen. That speed goes from an average of 15 minutes to like a minute or two, which is pretty great, right? So in terms of like, I want to make this change and I want to see it happen super fast now. So that's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. I want to speak because you said you said a lot of really great stuff, but hyperdrive, that's awesome. I mean, on your top 50 SKUs or on 50 SKUs, you can have super quick pricing, making you super competitive, because everyone, especially OA sellers, it's the race to the bottom, right? Well, if you are the first one to have the cheapest price, you're going to most likely get the buy box. And I'm sitting here because I'm thinking like, 50 price change every 15 minutes on a SKU, and I didn't realize it's 2 minutes. And so like, again, I'm
2 minutes
I'm
is the fastest that Amazon allows in their system. We have found a way to do that, again, with some limitation, every 10 seconds. And that's not just down, right? That's any repricing change. That's also up. I mean, think about that.
Yep. Yeah. No, when you get that offer who's, finally, sold out and now the price can start going up, you want to be taking it upwards as well and bringing the price back up. Man, that's really cool. I also really appreciate you guys are, you're going through and you could have rebuilt the original version, but you wanted to start from the ground floor. And I appreciate that as, as we're developing Cheddar Soft, technology changes so quickly. And we're actually, a little sneak, we're in the process of also rebuilding to a better architecture, because in the last, 3 years, it's dramatically changed. And it should be something that, if you're, anybody who's listening to this right now, if your repricer isn't doing updates, isn't, adapting and changing, it might have worked great a year ago and it still might be working okay now, but others are competing. So like what you're saying is like, you guys are going to come out and you're going to have a competitive advantage over every other repricer with hyperdrive. And, I'm sitting over here, sitting there thinking, well, we need to be we need to be on board with this as well, because we're, again, cavemen, we're sitting here at 15 minutes per price change. We're seeing, our profit get affected. We're wondering what are some things that we can do that can make some easy, quick changes. And getting onto a tool that is up to date with today's technology and is always innovating and looking to improve, that's huge.
Yeah. It becomes a massive competitive advantage, right? And it's not just like the technical aspect. That's certainly part of it, right? That enables us to scale and create new features, and that's awesome. it's also rethinking through how do you do things in the application, right? How do you get things done? And so a lot of tools in our space, unfortunately, don't think through UI UX, right? UI being how does it visually look? What does that button look like? Stuff like that. How do we make things more visually clear? But also the UX, the user experience, right? Like, what is the flow for completing this task? Is that good or is it bad? Am I making you click 5 more times than you actually need to and provide value? That's a problem. And so again, when I say like we are rebuilding, it's not just product. It's the entire company. It's
awesome.
everything. Yeah.
Me and you have had conversations outside of this about Cheddarsoft and Aurora, and I learned so much from you from just even the first call we ever had. And one of the things is you're so particular about the user experience, and that was the main. This is the most important thing: is are users able to come in? Are they having success, and are they able to do it in the quickest, most efficient way possible? And I appreciate the fact that that's such an important thing, because we've all been on programs where we get into we pay our money, we get access, we go, okay, what do I do? And how do I do this? That's just so important. So, talking a little bit about the story of how Aura got started, it was you and another co-founder who was also the tech side of things, but you guys started this in college. So how did you go from there to where you're at now? Because
good question. So at the time I was in Florida, that's where I grew up. I was in college. I had actually taken like 4 or 5 years off. And then decided to go back, wanted to get my bachelor's degree, complete that. So went back full time in finance. At the time was running my wholesale Amazon business. Was doing okay, was paying the bills, was starting to take off. I was starting to figure it out, which is awesome. I started hitting up every wholesale seller that was doing 7 figures. I was doing 6 at the time, to be like, hey, I'll pay you an hour of your time. I'm trying to figure out how to scale from 6 to 7. And back then there was probably like 10 people who did wholesale, period. So it's not a large number. And then my co-founder, James, at that point was the first one to be like, hey, like, don't worry about it. Let's just jam on this and have fun. And so we started to do that. Realized very quickly he had a very similar process to that I did. We were using like Trello spreadsheets to track everything. And it's like, hey, I'm a computer science major right now. I also just built a web app version of this, which now is VinDriveCRM.com. So we decided to team up on that. He would own technical, I would own, everything else. And then we started to build up the wholesale Facebook group. We got that up to like 15,000 people. So where everybody was charging, a ton of money to teach it, we said, why don't we just do it live, show it, use our tool. And we did that every Tuesday for about 2 hours for about 2.5 years, pretty consistently. So that built up a big audience. We launched the Wholesale Made Easy podcast. So that was pretty awesome. We still get listens, and we haven't really released a new episode in like 2 or 3 years at this point. Actually, definitely 3. So we did a lot of that. And then eventually, we made every mistake in the book when it comes to software, right? Pricing, target audience, all these things. And we're like, okay, well, this is fun though. We can change things, right? So we said, okay, well, what's the next thing we could have the biggest impact on? Repricing was the thing that we were most excited to solve, because one, it's just so complex to do, right? You don't just write a repricing tool. There's so much there, especially if you want to do it commercially, right? I love when people are like, well, I wrote my own, so I'm going to make it commercial. It's like, that's fundamentally 2 different things. We had the capability to do that. And we're like, well, great, let's approach it completely different. What do we hate? Well, we don't like how customer support teams are structured. Okay, we can fix that, right? So I did support for the first 2.5 years as one of the founders, like full time, like literally that's what I did on top of everything else. And it was the best use of my time. We wanted things to be thought through from a design perspective. Granted, we didn't have a product designer on the team at that point, but James is very, very keen on that, right? A lot of times our tools are designed with an engineer's perspective, which, it works, but like, it's not really thought through from a, like, is this, structured correctly or thought through? It's just like, no, but this is how it works. It's like, yeah, it's not the same thing, right? So we took a slightly different approach there, and hence why the tool has been known as being very intuitive and easy to use. So, James pretty much locked himself away for 80 hours a week for like 8 or 9 months, knocked out the beta. We launched, that took off. We eventually graduated at the time. It was doing super well. We're like, great, we don't need to get jobs, because I had actually shut down my Amazon business because I can't manage that many things at once. Something had to go. So I was like, hey, I want to go software. That makes a lot of sense. That's exciting for me. Shut down the Amazon business, focused on the software and then school full time. And then as we got closer to graduation, we're like, well, what do we want to do here? We have some opportunities. It's doing really well. We're like, well, let's go build a company. So that's what we decided to do. So we started building out the team, hired Finn. He was the first employee to come on, first team member to come on, took over day-to-day support tasks to free me up to focus more on like customer success stuff, like onboarding, stuff like that. And then we've just been growing ever since. So, and now we're just kind of in this rebirth era, if you will.
Yeah, man, that's fun. That's fun that you're able to start something with your friends, and now you're working together, and you guys are out of Chicago, no, Boston. You have an office. You guys just moved into an office in Boston.
Yeah, so we've been here it's funny, peak COVID, everybody was going remote. We went from remote to co-located. So we've been in this space for a little over 3 years. Technically, we just renewed our lease, which kicks on the renewals in like a month or two. So right about 3 years we've been here. So this is our own office space. We got, our logo on the wall, our colors, everything. So it's awesome.
That's exciting. I like working from home, but I will look forward to the one day where I walk into a big old like office with like a, it probably won't say Cheddar Soft, but like a Cheddar Soft, something like that, the new logo, the new name or something. That'll be exciting. Well, perfect. I like to let people know where we can find more information about Aura. And then also you have a waiting list right now for Aura 1.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So can we, do you mind if I show it or unless you want to pull it up?
Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, feel free. So for anybody interested, you can join Aura right now at goaura.com. We have a 14-day free trial. We don't ask for a credit card up front. If you go to goaura.com/0NE, so 1 or ONE, sorry. This is actually kind of highlighting the new brand, where are we taking things, what's changing, as well as a wait list, right? So what we're doing, this is not going to be a complete switch. We're not going to say, hey, everybody's on Aura 1.0 right now. We're dealing with pricing. We're dealing with your inventory. So we're going to take that very seriously. So we're actually doing a migration process, right? So we're going to bring in a batch of people, test, see if there's any bugs, fix those if there are, pull in the next batch, so on and so forth. We're being very intentional about the way we roll this out. So if you want to be on that list, basically we're going to pull people from that list first, and we will actually prioritize current users that are on the wait list first. Then non-users on the wait list, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, we're making a ton of progress. We're still super heads down, but that's great. We're doing some awesome stuff.
What I'm hearing is jump on Aurora now, get yourself on the waiting list, so that way you're one of the first to get to be able to swap over to the new version. And 14-day free trial, no credit card needed. That's super awesome. It's like no risk at all. So goaurora.com.
We'll also personally onboard you too. So even in that free trial, reach out to a support team. That bottom right icon there, you can click that, talk to our team. We're live from 9 to 5 p.m. EST. We don't outsource any of that. So in our average median, or really our median first response time is less than 10 minutes. It's really less than 5 minutes. So our response is really, really fast during business hours. But reach out to the team, be like, hey, I just signed up. Looking to get started, have some questions. We'd love to get personally onboarded. Let us know. We'll send you a Calendly link. And we'll actually sit down for 20 minutes and we'll personally onboard you one-on-one. That way you're making the most of that free trial phase and really, really kick it off.
That's great for folks who are jumping in to be able to get that hands-on help, and especially that you don't outsource it. It's either gonna be you or somebody directly in your team. That's super powerful. I also want to point out too, your guys' resources page is excellent too. So if anyone is also pop in, check out their resource page as well, because I was looking. There's a lot of blog posts that you guys have in there, and just some helpful information as well.
That's actually another thing. So on the content side, we're really tripling down on that. Again, we kind of pulled back on that for capacity, but we're increasing not only the quality of the content we're creating, but also the quantity again, right? So we've actually got a handful of blog posts ready to go. So the blog's going to get a full redesign. We're going to optimize that again. Really get back to writing some fun stuff that is just useful to get sellers thinking differently, or how do you do this one thing that nobody's talking about? We're going to write that. We're also going to be doing a lot of videos. Like before we jumped in here, we're recording a how-to video for new Aura.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing a lot of things outside of just the product. Again, we're redefining everything we do, including, the resources and all that stuff. So we're about to take even our help desk articles, which I think are really, really good. And we're going to enhance those, make those 10x better. We'll have more. We'll have videos like this attached to the actual article, because some people just don't like to read. You're visual learners.
Yep.
I get it. Me too. Great. You'll
That's
have a
me.
video for that. Yep.
It's 100% me. You give me a video or give me some text, I'll sit there and watch the video. Well, man, Dillon, that was awesome. Thank you for coming on with us today.
Yeah.
Last question, I have this from the chat, and I'm not sure, but it's what do you suggest for map pricing? So we don't go below map. So obviously a wholesaler.
Yep.
And for those who might not know what map pricing means, that stands for minimum advertised pricing. So when you sign up for it with a wholesaler, they normally say, hey, you cannot sell this product for any less than this number right here. So any tips or anything that you'd suggest for somebody who might be up against map pricing and wanting to increase their sales?
Yeah, there's really only two scenarios that I've ever seen. One is if there is a map, you're basically selling at it, in which case repricing does not do anything because nobody's changing their price, right? That's been 90% of my experience and what I tend to see. So you can still add a repricing strategy in case something does happen. What I tend to recommend there is the map pricing field in Aura on a listing is for reference purposes only, because you don't always follow that. Either it's lower and your actual minimum is higher, or the inverse. It's your agreement. You break it if you want to. So I would still recommend, if you want to follow it, to add the map value as your manual minimum price. That way Aura does not go below that. Super, super important. The second scenario that can happen, I rarely see it, but it is possible, is that the actual map price is much lower than where the market is, in which case, again, at that point, I would say map is going to be the map field, and then my actual minimum, which is higher than the map, can just be my minimum, in which case it kind of operates like a regular SKU. But again, I would say actually 9.9% of the time, if there's map for a wholesale product, you're going to be selling at map. And because you can't change anything on the price side, repricing isn't really going to help. What I would recommend is actually slowly increasing your volume because of the regional buy box situation. So you might not be able to increase necessarily your total organic buy box percentage, but increase the amount of opportunities you can get sales via these regional buy boxes. Your sales should still go up. I would also look into PPC ads if you have enough margin on those.
100%. I'd also throw in a couple of tips there, because I've ran into this with a little bit of wholesale that we did. Talk to your rep and see if you can do a coupon.
Nice.
Advertise the same price, but it does give you a little bit of a competitive edge running special sales based on holidays, or go to your rep and show them the data. Let them know that in the Amazon space, they need to be more competitively priced if some of their competition is outpacing them. I had a rep, they were like, yeah, you can do whatever you want for coupons and sales. I was like, great. Okay. So sure enough, I threw like a 5% coupon on the deal, and next thing you know, my sales started coming through again.
Yep. That's awesome.
And work on always increasing your feedback score, because when you're playing wholesale, that is a big aspect to it. I saw that again. Grant and I are kind of watching this because we think it's becoming more and more true. But merchant fulfill is starting to even take priority over FBA when it comes to getting the buy box. And a part of it's all regional.
Yeah, it's less about fulfillment types, because they have good enough data. And I mean, if you can merchant fulfill it in one day instead of FBA it in 2 or 3, that's a better situation for the customer. So they're going to do that. Back in the day, again, 10 years ago, merchant fulfill was like, why are you even wasting your time? These days, though, it's not that one is necessarily better than the other, but in certain situations, that is true. Yeah. So, I mean, you're seeing more people do it. I don't like it because it's more manual work operationally, but I get it.
We're actually just starting to do that. So we used to do all of our prep and pack and send out all that to FBA, and we do some merchant fulfill as well, especially with like hazmat or perfumes, glass items. And when we switched to our prep center, we stopped all of that, and we're actually now Grant's firing back up the old little prep center in
Yep.
his garage. He's all excited because we're going to start merchant fulfilling smaller items, high profit type stuff, but also having another competitive listing, and having a merchant
Yeah.
fulfill offer and an FBA offer
Right.
on some of those SKUs that we can get lots of inventory on. So, for any of the wholesalers, like if you're selling, it was this little tiny tube, throw it in an envelope.
Yep.
It was less than a pound. So we would merchant fulfill those as well. And
That's great.
we saw the benefit of that. Well, sweet. Again, Dillon, thank you so much for coming on. Any last words that you'd like to say to those who are watching the recording or might be on live with us?
Yeah, all I would say is don't put off repricing. I know that sounds biased coming from me, but I also did that as a seller. And now that I am on the side that I am on and have seen the data, it is so interesting to see the difference in growth rates between those using it and those not using it. We're talking people like we have countless emails, support chat messages of people saying like, hey, I've been using it for like a month or two and I finally like quit my job. Like it could be that difference. And I don't think enough people understand how much of an amplification, how much of a multiplier repricing is on your account. And it's really like I wouldn't call it set it and forget it, but it's a lot of leverage technically for sellers. So if you're, you got a handful of SKUs, you're doing at least, I would say $5,000 a month consistently in sales, you need to start looking at it because that can be the difference between you hitting that catalyst that allows you to begin to grow really, really fast or, growing very, very slow. It could be that difference.
Yep. I agree with everything you just said right there. It was for us, it was a night and day difference. And repricing, having a nice repricer where you can go in and grab a segment of your inventory, change a strategy, and then move on to the next task is humongous. And for the new sellers out there too, who might be going, hey, I already have to pay for a Keepa account or my profit calculator, that kind of stuff. A repricer is something that you should be adding to your tech deck fairly soon in your Amazon career. Amazon does give you some free basic tools to allow you to do it on a small scale, but it completely changes the game when you add one. And I want to point out too, there's a large variety in the costs. And I don't know what, I assume you guys are probably with Aurora 1 there, especially with all the new updates that you guys are coming up, there's probably going to be a price change. But currently, Aurora is priced at, if you go to join right now, it's $97 a month for the monthly, $77 a month if you choose an annual package. That is very well priced for what you're getting in a repricer. There are some pricers that go take you all the way up to like $500. I've never understood. I would never spend that much on a repricer, but under $100 is a no-brainer, and because the profit that you'll make from that alone, even with a small amount of inventory, is going to cover the costs and then some with it. So guys, go check it out, goaurora.com. We'll have the link in the description below on the recordings. It's inside the chat for those who are on with us live. Dillon, thank you again. For everyone else, y'all have a good rest of your day and we'll see you on the next one.